Hello, and welcome to the Redundancy Matters podcast, helping compassionate HR professionals managing redundancies who want to put people at the heart of the process. I'm your host, June Hogan, a qualified career coach, an outplacement specialist with a background in HR, and founder of outplacement services provider Wildwood Coaching. If you're managing a redundancy process, then there's a very good chance that someone will ask you for help with their CV. I understand that not every organisation provides outplacement support, and so people are likely to come to you as a HR professional or their line manager because they want some reassurance, they want some guidance, and quite often they just don't know where to start. Because for some people, it might have been years since they last applied for a job. Some people might not have a CV at all, and others might just be struggling to see their strengths, their achievements, because they're still in shock at being told their role is at risk of redundancy. So in today's episode, I'm joined by career coach Phil Sterne. And Phil and I have worked together for a number of years now, and I thought I would invite him along to the podcast so that we could talk about practical ways to help people get started with their CV, and to give you some insights on what you can do to support people if you find yourself in that situation. We talk about why confidence can take a knock during redundancy. We also talk about why people find it really difficult to articulate their value, especially when they're looking at their CV. And we also talk about how to help people move beyond a CV that reads like a job description and more into a CV that demonstrates impact. So whether you're supporting employees directly because you're not able to provide access to outplacement support, or maybe you just want a better understanding of what people need when they've come to you to ask you for guidance and support to update their CV, then I really hope you enjoy this conversation. And of course, if you do want to provide access to outplacement support so that people can work with professionals like Phil and myself, then you'll find all the details of how to do that in the show notes. Okay, so let's dive into today's conversation. Welcome to today's episode of Redundancy Matters, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Phil Sterne. Phil Sterne is a career coach who helps senior people navigate career crossroads, and Phil and I have been working together now for a few years, and he also does some work for me within my outplacement business. So Phil, this is lovely to have you on the podcast today.
Hi, June. Thank you very much.
And I'm really looking forward to our conversation. So that was a very short introduction about you and what you do. So tell us a bit more about what you do, where you've come from, and the sorts of things that you support people with.
Sure. Thank you. My background is all in recruitment, and I've spent the best part of 20 years working in a range of different recruitment settings, both in agency and headhunting, and then in-house in client-side teams, building recruitment practices and leading teams, and basically making recruitment and resourcing, as we called it then, not talent acquisition so much. We didn't really have that language. Making those operations better. Spent a few years contracting, funnily enough, after I was made redundant. And I also have worked at Amazon, helping them grow their business across the UK and across Europe as well. And then in 2020, and it was nothing to do with the pandemic, I'd already made the decision of leaving Amazon. I left in the January of that year. And by that February, I had set myself up as a careers coach, helping people with their CVs and LinkedIn profiles and whatnot. But what I discovered over the course of the last 6 years of doing that is that actually people come to me thinking that they want a CV, and that's usually a big part of it. But actually the bigger thing that they go away with is confidence in their next move, having articulated or being encouraged to articulate the real values that they bring, what they want to do, what they don't want to do, what they want their lives to look like. And then the CV is offered a product of that. But yeah, so I've been doing that for 6 years. And as you say, I've done quite a lot of work for your clients as well.
Thank you, Phil. And yeah, I think we'll get into that a little bit in the conversation, in that particularly the clients that I work with and some of the clients that you work with as well, when they're at that transition point with redundancy,
Mm.
And it's natural to think, I need to update my CV. And of course, that is a pressing and present issue. But there's a lot more that goes with that. So we'll dig into that. So the podcast is called Redundancy Matters. And you said
Yes.
that you've experienced redundancy. But why does redundancy matter to you?
Like I say, I've been made redundant, and I've been, like you, on the other side of the table as well, whether that was actually having redundancy conversations with team members as a member of the HR team, or structuring a selection processes and frameworks and whatnot for restructuring the situations. I've been involved in it on both sides, actually, and a third, because of course I now have clients who I work with who have been made redundant or who have taken settlement agreements. And I think the common themes that I've seen are generally when people have been made redundant, particularly after a lot of time in a company, so say perhaps they've been with the company for a decade or two, is that they come out into the outside world and they don't know what to do. There's a real kind of, what, I haven't got a clue what I'm doing. The world's moved on and they haven't needed to look for a job for 5, 10, 15, 20, however many years. It's not just about the kind of tactical stuff around the getting a CV and having a product that they can go out there with. It's, what the hell do I do with my life now? Where am I at? And I don't know. And there's lots of I don't know. I think what really matters about handling a redundancy process from an HR perspective is, as I'm sure you would say, just handle it with care. For people, their job is so much more than their job, and more often than not, it's part of who they are. It becomes their identity, whether they realize it or not. So just cutting somebody loose after so many years is going to have an impact on who they are as a person, what their purpose is. So yeah, just handle it with care.
And when you were talking there, and I was thinking, and you have articulated it there, that if somebody is just focusing on, I need to work on my CV, whether that's coming to you as an experienced CV writer, whether that's going to their HR manager because they're still working through the process, whether it's coming to an outplacement provider, whoever it is, it's that notion that I just need to get my CV updated. But there's so much else that is entangled in all of that, because redundancy is a life-changing event and has an impact far wider than I'll just need to go and find another job. So what are some of the things that you notice that can get in the way when you're working with somebody who is coming to you with that notion of, I need to update my CV, and start to talk about some of the things around their achievements, their skills and their value, particularly in a redundancy situation?
Often they haven't really had to think about it forever. They just turn up at their job, do their job, and come home, or they separate their work from their home. And because they've been doing it for so long, they've got this unconscious competence. So they forget what they know. If they don't necessarily always recognize the value that they've brought to the organizations that they've worked with along the line, because whatever it is that they've done, it's just, how they might say, it's just obvious. I just do it. So until you start picking some of the things that they've actually done and asking why they did it that way, or how did they get to be doing that, or why were they asked to do that, or what is it they're known for, it's only really then that you start to understand, or that they start to understand, oh, actually, I had some value over and above my job description. And quite often, you'll have seen it, I'm sure, when we've got CVs in front of us, that quite often, even at a senior level, they can read as job descriptions, because people are so engrossed in their work, they don't think about their CV, so they don't need to do it. So when they come to do it, it's often a case of, what was in my job description? What were the things I was responsible for? So we end up with a list of responsibilities rather than things they actually did. So I suppose the main thing that gets in the way is this kind of massive blind spot of not realizing the value that they actually brought, or not being able to quantify or qualify it.
And when confidence has been knocked through a redundancy process, that makes it even harder. And I've had to update my own CV. You probably had to do the same. And when you're in a redundancy situation, it's probably the last thing that you feel like doing. but it's the first thing that you have to do.
For sure, because when your confidence is not like that, you can start to call into question the actual value that you've given. Even if you've had years of good feedback or whatever, it is a real likelihood that you could be sitting there going, that they've got rid of me for a purpose or for a reason. Where is my value? Don't know, which kind of might have the effect of almost throwing a blanket over their experience. So it's even more difficult. It becomes even more opaque.
And you mentioned there about some people may not even have a CV. Quite regularly, I work with senior clients who've never had to look for a job since they left school. And people assume, well, you're a senior, you've been working for 20 years, you must have an up-to-date CV. So for those people, and I was in this situation when I was made redundant both times, I didn't have a CV. The second time I had the old one from 8 years ago. But for somebody who either hasn't updated their CV for a while or they've never had to have a CV, and particularly people listening might be supporting people through a redundancy process, HR professionals listening to this, or line managers. If someone's coming to them going, I don't even know where to start, been working for 15 years, what do I do? Have you got any sort of tips or ideas of how you can even start that process with somebody?
If somebody has no CV or something that they wrote in, I don't know, 20 years ago or 15 years ago, if they've got something, it's better than having nothing. But I also recognize that some people's CV is steeped maybe in the 90s or early 2000s even, and it's still written in Times New Roman. But even having that as a starting place is better than nothing. But honestly, if you do have nothing, and it may be quite common, because I know that if people have moved on within an organization or even outside of their organization, in the old way was that people would get tapped on the shoulder. More often than not, people would get tapped up for jobs, and the CV was almost a cord of their career history that supported an interview conversation. Whereas all that time while they've been busy at work, the purpose of the CV has become absolutely about being a marketing document. And people aren't getting tapped on the shoulder anymore as much. And certainly that's what my clients are telling me. And that's one of the challenges. They're coming to me and then say, well, they're saying, I don't know where to start because I'm used to being tapped on the shoulder. But essentially, if you think of it as a marketing document, if you think about from the perspective of what are the problems that my new employer needs to solve. So you think about it from that perspective, as opposed to what skills do I bring, then you're going to be on the right lines, because it's a marketing document, it has to be about solving a problem rather than being an anthology of your history. I even say in the actual career, your experience, people often put career history, and it's the smallest thing, but I always say, just change that. Let's just change that to experience. That is what you're bringing. Your career history, this isn't a history document. This isn't an archaeological dig through your career. It's how have I solved problems that are similar to the kind of problems that you, ex-employer, may have. So that's one thing. The other thing that brings to mind is about getting across really quickly in the first sort of third of a page, because that's what we see on the screen. Of course, who has paper CVs these days? Is getting across in that first third to a half of a page opportunities for the recruiter to start mentally ticking off the things that they need to see in order to consider you as a relevant candidate, because they're not going to be reading through your CV in detail until they've done that hallowed 6-second whiz through where they're literally just looking for signals. I know ChatGPT talks about signal, more signal, less noise, but it is that. And you can do that in so many ways in that first third to a half of a page, but it's something that's necessary.
I love the way you describe that there. For the CV as a marketing document, it's not, as you said there, an archaeological dig through your experience and through your history. And lots of people will be quite rightly proud of their work history, their experience, and want to display it all And I think one of the things that, and I see this a lot, and it frustrates me, and I'm sure it does you as well, is that age discrimination is a thing, unfortunately, within recruitment. And so for people who have a long career history, there's generally some tips and let you articulate them. But we don't need to have every job that you did since you left school. We don't need to have kind of lots of that detail because, and I know you've described the CV like a funnel, the more relevant information is going to be the stuff that's more recent. So just talk us through a little bit about that. I say age discrimination is shouldn't be a thing that we have to talk about, but unfortunately it's a reality. How
Yeah.
can people make sure that they're coming across in the best way on their CV, particularly as you say, you've got that first third that the recruiters are looking at?
I suppose there's an important distinction here is, of course, to not be disingenuous, right? That if you have got 30 years experience, great, that you're going to be a great hire for somebody. But you're right, age discrimination does exist, however we like it or not. So one of the things you can do, you mentioned the funnel there, is to front load the experience on the front page with the last sort of 5 years of work. And as you go further back, you reduce the amount of detail that you put into any particular job listing. And depending on how relevant things are, you might only want to go back 15 years, maybe 20 max within any detail. And then after that, you can literally just kind of line item the job entries and you may roll them up. Say you had 3 jobs in one particular place, you could roll them up and you could put them into a particular time bracket, but it's literally just on one line. So company, job title, date. You could, if you wanted to remove all of those dates, you could just have a little section that says earlier career. And it might be just a really short paragraph, perhaps 3 lines that said, I spent the first part of my career, being specific about a decade and a half, but the first part of my career working my way up through this and this, gaining that kind of experience in these kinds of organizations, which led to my role at blah, which is whatever the next one is. So that's one thing you could do. Another thing you can do is you can just take the dates off your education. That's another good thing you can do. There are other subtle giveaways that somebody is a bit older in their CV, and it could again be the font. It could be that it's written in Times New Roman. It could be that they've got an AOL or a Hotmail account address or a Yahoo. My dad's got a Yahoo address and he's 75. My first email address was an AOL address. You and I, we're of an age where we were there when the first email addresses were coming out. And I switched to BT Internet. And now, of course, I'm with Gmail. And who knows that I'm 50 years old? It's Gmail, isn't it? Whereas if I had an AOL address, it ages you, but also it suggests that you're not really moving with the times and you might be a little bit old-fashioned and update some of that stuff. And this isn't about being down with the kids and all of that, but it's just about presenting yourself in a way that could remove subtle signs of age.
Yeah, no, there's some really useful tips there. And you talked there about CVs not reading like a job description. So I'm thinking about somebody who's at risk of redundancy and maybe they're just looking for some support. They've gone to talk to their line manager about helping them with their CV.
Yeah.
A job description to me sounds like a good place to start because it reminds you of the things that you are responsible for. We all know that day-to-day job descriptions don't always necessarily read across. But from your perspective, turning a job description into a CV and kind of an achievement-focused statement, what's the best way that someone is listening to this thinking, I'd love to give my team members some help with this. How could I help them see their job description reflected in more of a CV action statement?
Okay, dead simple. So if you think about let's just pack this in a different way quickly. So in a CV, you're going to have 2 types of bullet point. You're going to have a bullet point that's in the present tense, maybe, and you're going to have a bullet point that's in the past tense. So if part of your job, for example, is facilitating workshops to help people devise processes, that's a bit of a clumsy sentence, but off the top of my head, it's really passive, isn't it? It sounds like it's come straight from a job description, facilitating, so what? Okay. If you just take that exact same sentence and turn it into the past tense, so facilitated workshops to help teams devise new processes, then immediately you've got something that you can work with. You're literally just taking the present tense sentence and putting it in the past tense, leading with that verb in the past tense, and then add to it some kind of outcome. So facilitated workshops to help teams develop new processes in order that they were able to save £1 million. So if you've got some kind of quantifiable output, you're not always going to be able to get a quantifiable output in terms of money or time or whatever. But if you can, then do. And sometimes you might want to actually lead with that as the outcome. So saved £1 million by facilitating workshops to help teams devise new processes that cut out X amount of steps, or improve the customer experience, or did this or did that. So actually using your job description as a springboard, if you like, to think about, if I did this, if I put that in the past tense, what was it doing and what was the outcome? Great. Let's maybe lead with the outcome, because that's the important thing. That's going back to what I was saying about solving the problem. Most companies' problems are, how do we sell more? How do we sell more at a lower cost to sell? So how do we reduce costs? Yeah, if you can get those things across in a CV, then you're showing that you understand the business a little bit more.
Yeah, so there's some really useful points in here about it's a marketing document. It's not just about historical kind of information. It's making it active. It's adding in some outcomes and some measurables. We talked about how you can shape it around listing your experience and not necessarily going into loads of detail if you do have a longer career history. So I'm wondering if we should talk about the elephant in the room, which is AI and CV writing.
Yeah.
So talk us through, because I've seen CVs from clients that have been written by AI, and there's no judgment there, because if you are being told you're losing your job, and the first thing you're going to do is try and do whatever you can to find another job, and that might be an immediate, I'm going to go and get ChatGPT to update my CV, and there's no judgment based in that situation at all, because you're going to be in panic situation, aren't you?
Yes.
But just talk us through what you've seen, what you've noticed, and even where AI can be helpful, because I'm not suggesting it isn't helpful in this situation, but just talk us through a bit about that.
Okay, cool. So you're absolutely right. It can be helpful. And of course, if we were having this conversation a year, 18 months ago, it wouldn't even be a thing. It's quite crazy how it's come into all parts of business, like a tsunami wave, really. But yeah, I was talking to a client the other day who had sent me 2 versions of their CV. And without him telling me, I knew which one was written by AI. Because I know what a ChatGPT document looks like, because I've had them, and you're not the only one. Typically, it'll have quite wide margins. It'll have the same font. It'll have the line that separates bits of text. It'll have big, bold headings, and this usually can be quite skeletal as well. I tend to see that. And what happens is somebody takes their existing CV, adds a few notes about maybe what their job was in their latest job, adds it to a ChatGPT chat along with a job ad, and says, write my CV for this job. But it's inevitably just missing loads of context. And I would say with this chap that I was talking to the other day, he was ex-Amazon, who's over in the States, in the New York state. And these 2 versions that I was looking at, one, like I say, was clearly ChatGPT, but the other one was actually better. It wasn't great, but it was better. It was more rich, and it had more for us to go on. So when it came to us rewriting it or talking about what the new content would look like, I didn't even bother with the ChatGPT one, because there was just not enough there, and it really lacked personality. So I think if there is a trap, it's panic stations, drop existing CV and job advert into ChatGPT, write me a CV that resolves this, that would get me an interview for this job. So the downside is recruiters will know that, be able to spot it from a mile off, and it won't sound or feel like you. There is a place for it, though. Now, up until this year or late last year, every client that I've worked with, I then not hand wrote, but I did it all myself using my own brain, rewriting their CV. But actually the value comes from the conversation. The value comes from the conversation and asking the right questions that uncovers the context and the answers that, that I need to be able to rewrite a CV. So sometimes if I've got a lot of that, pages and pages of notes, for example, or I might use Fireflies to record the meeting, and there may be some anecdote that I've missed in my notes or some side note that they've mentioned that I've not picked up that can be a real kind of bit of gold to include in the CV. So often what I'll do is I'll take my notes and I'll take a transcript of the call if they're permitting me to do it, and I'll ask whichever AI to identify insights that I haven't, or to summarize insights in a different way, just because it saves time. And it means that I can get to my version more quickly. If you are advising people on how to use AI as part of the CV writing, it might be to get AI to ask you some questions to help you write an effective CV. Now, I don't know how good it will be at that, because I know that when I'm asking those questions, A, is born out of 20 years of experience of handling CVs and working in recruitment and doing what I do. B, it's out of the insight of knowing which question to ask to get to the end result. And also from having built some actual rapport with the person. So I'm not saying don't use AI, but I would say use it in support of a human conversation rather than instead of.
And that notion of using it maybe more as a coach than necessarily as an author, and having those prompts which are looking for gaps and insights and what's missing and what else, and as opposed to just do this for me because I don't know where to start.
Yeah.
And there might be, if somebody's working through their CV, they might have some parts that they're struggling with. So using it for maybe just helping with some wordsmithing or something like that. But that notion of just handing the whole thing over, as you said there, to just ask AI to do it for you, that's never going to be.
No, I don't think so. Not at the moment anyway. I just don't think it's intelligent enough to, I think and I've thought about this, I'm sure there are others doing it, about creating an AI agent to actually do some of this intelligent conversation. But yeah, great example of if you've written a big, long, what people might call a personal statement or summary section or whatever it is at the top. And those things can be like bricks. I've seen them. It's 15 lines of solid text and loads of the CV tropes like track record in this and highly organized. And
I know that's one of your bugbears, isn't it? Passionate.
All of the passionate, all of that stuff. And being able to say to it, okay, I'm going to be applying for these kinds of jobs. Take the content of my CV and my existing summary and reduce it into three short sections. One which basically says what I do for who, one which says what I'm known for, and one that says what I enjoy or why I do what I do. But each of those sentences pointing to an outcome for an employer. Then you've got something better. You will have something better, and then you might just need to ask it to consolidate it by a third to reduce the word count. And then you will have something that is probably better than having 15 lines of solid text, but I would still get a human to look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it might be, you said there about having the conversation. Again, if you're not able to access professional support, or you're supporting somebody during a redundancy consultation process, then maybe they just do some voice notes or something like that, or just put information into a conversation, answering some of those questions, as you said there, that you can get ChatGPT to ask you about what information would I need to create a great CV, and then you start answering it. But I think the summary is, if you can get access to professional support, clearly that's going to be better. But as a minimum, you're going to need someone else to maybe read through it or look over it. Don't just rely on it completely.
No, I think the sort of side thing here that we haven't really talked about is you're going through, or that person or those people are going through human emotions. And being able to support them in a human way, supported by AI, is always going to be a better experience than a purely AI solution. You're helping somebody through a difficult human experience. And I'd worry if that was being entirely, at the moment at least, being entirely outsourced to technology to resolve. And much as in the same way as hiring using AI chatbots and videos and stuff, I think is not the ideal way for everybody. Might be different for now.
Yeah, no, you made a good point there, because the process that you'll go through with clients and that we see as well is even just having that human connection and that human conversation. Yes, the outcome is a CV, but there's so much more that goes on when you're having those kind of discussions that
Yeah,
people
there's
can.
nuances, aren't there, that we pick up on, particularly if we're doing a video call, coaching call. So often what's not said that holds the gold. You can detect a silence or a facial expression in a conversation that you can hold and just, what was that? What was just going through your mind just there? AI won't do that for you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So if someone's listening to this and they've got someone in their team, or they've got some team members who are going to be going through a redundancy process, and they want to do what they can to support them during that process with regard to CVs. I know we've talked a lot there, and there's loads more that we could have covered in terms of how to create a great CV to secure interviews. But what would be some of your top tips if someone's come into your office, or you've got an online conversation and they're like, I'm really struggling, I haven't updated my CV, I don't even know where to start, can you help me? What advice would you give someone listening to this?
I think a mistake that people might make, particularly if they're leaving a business after, or a role after some years, and I often talk about a decade or two even, is that they may knee jerk into, I've got to get another job. And that's even if they're walking away with 6 months or a year's money, which often happens, right? We've both seen it with clients that we've had. But because work is them and they've been used to getting up and going to work and earning some salary, suddenly there may be this sort of scarcity around in their minds about, I've got to get another job. I've got to get a salary coming in. I've got to start making this happen, because how do we pay the school fees? How do I pay for this? How do I pay for that? Even though, like I say, they probably might have 6 months or a year's money. And I think one of the mistakes people make is doing that and diving straight into, I've just got to rewrite the CV and get it out there and get it to some recruiters. When often they've got an opportunity just to pause. And what I see quite often is people saying, I want to consider doing this kind of role and maybe that kind of role and maybe some consultancy. Can you do me a CV for that? Slow down. I can't do. Remember, this is a marketing document. We're solving a problem, not solving 3 or 5. And so if you're in that situation, I'd really encourage you to take stock and think about, actually, what is it that I enjoy? What is it I want to fill my days with? If I reflect over the last 10, 15, 20 years, what have I enjoyed the most? What have I contributed the most? Where has my value been? And what do I want to do more of? And by doing that, is creating an identity that is you, not you at that last employer. It's understanding more about you. And that will help you identify, okay, what direction do you want to actually go in? So there's like a reset moment. Let's get some clarity. And then we're into direction. Okay, what 1 or 2 types of roles is it I really want to go into? And once you've nailed that direction, then you can start thinking about your CV, and then you can create a really neatly tailored CV to that specific direction. But if you've got half a dozen different things that you fancy doing and you try to answer all of that in one CV, and it does become like one massive document with everything you've ever done on it, then the chances are you're not going to get picked up, because it's not really clear the one thing that you do, or the 1 or 2 things that you do and do really well. So my advice would be just to slow down.
Yeah. Yeah. And that would lead into other things, such as, then what's your job search strategy? You've got to know what you're looking for. You've got to be targeted with all of that. And that's a project of another discussion.
Actually, using that, if you can find, not often, every time I ask my clients to bring me a couple of target job adverts. And this does two things. One, it gives me something to work backwards from or to ask questions from to help get the right kind of information for the CV. But also it gets the client to really think about what it is that they want. And if I get 5 different job descriptions for 5 different things, I'll be saying, okay, well, which one of these is it? Because we can't do one CV for 5. We can't have one CV that's a COO, CEO, Chief Revenue Officer, and a transformation director. Yeah, those are all 4 different jobs. So then they're 4 different problems that we're solving. So sure, we can write 4 different CVs, but which one is it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how we've looped back to that point of a CV is a document that demonstrates the problems that you can solve for a future employer.
Yeah.
And remembering that.
Oh, exactly. I think the biggest mistake people make is they write the CV for the job they've got, not the job they want. You absolutely need to write the CV for the job you want.
Yeah. And that applies to somebody in an entry-level role up to the C-suite. These principles we've been talking about today, I know you work with senior clients, but it doesn't matter what level you're at, that they're all the same.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter if you're going for a sideways move or a diagonal move or a straight promotional move, or actually going to do something. This might be a diagonal move. You're going to do something slightly differently, or a different type of job, but it's a promotion or sideways or whatever. By presenting your current experience through the frame or the lens of that job is going to be a mistake. You need to be able to pick out the elements, get the positioning in your mind that isn't necessarily going to be quite as relevant to the job that you're going for. So you need to be able to pick out of it which bits of it and which bits of framing are going to be relevant to that promotion or to that job. It's being able to change the perspective on the role. Literally, I'm holding my hands up in a kind of a ball shape here, but you can look at it straight on and go, that's the job that I've had. But if you look at it from the side and go, I did this and this, which are more relevant to that job, that's how you need to be presenting yourself for that job, because otherwise there'll be a disconnect.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Phil, there's lots more that we could dig into with all of this, but I'm really pleased that we've covered some of the fundamentals there, and hopefully people listening who are either going through this themselves or supporting others who are going through a redundancy process have got some real insights there into some practical things that they can do to help people. So thank you so much for sharing your insights and knowledge. So if people want to find out more about what you do, where can they find you?
They can find me on my website, which is philsterne.com. They can find me on LinkedIn, Phil Sterne. Sterne with an E, though, Sterne. I'm sure that'll be in the show notes. And they're in those 2 places mainly, but I'm very open to people just getting in touch and we have a conversation and see if there's a fit, see how I can help you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Phil. Yes, I'll put all of that in the show notes. And yeah, I can highly recommend Phil for the work that we've done together. He does some amazing work for my clients and his as well. So I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much, Phil.
And my absolute pleasure. It's been great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to the Redundancy Matters podcast. I hope you found today's episode helpful. It would mean a lot to me if you would follow, rate and review this podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts, as this helps it reach more people who are managing redundancies. Let me know what you thought, and if you have ideas for future episodes, I'd love to hear from you. You can find me on LinkedIn, June Hogan, and get in touch via my website, wildwoodcoaching.co.uk, where you'll also find more resources to help you manage redundancies. I hope you'll join me again soon for the next episode of Redundancy Matters.